Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to start by asking you to do something a little weird.
Okay.
I want you to try and visualize a mystery that is so ubiquitous. I mean, it's so constantly in your face that you have probably stopped seeing it as a mystery altogether.
It's the kind of mystery that hides in plain sight, usually on a screen.
Exactly. So I want you to picture a stack of paper, just standard white printer paper.
Right.
You take a pen, and on the first sheet, you draw a circle, just a crude static circle.
Okay, I'm with you.
Then you flip the page, you trace that circle, but you move it maybe, I don't know, 2 millimeters to the right.
It's a tiny nudge.
Right. You do this again and again and again. You do it 100 times.
So you have a stack of 100 dead drawings.
Dead drawings, exactly. If you spread them out on the floor, they are just graphite on wood pulp. They are static.
Yeah, they have no mass, no energy, no intent.
They are literally just marks.
But then the magic trick happens.
The magic trick happens. You pick up the stack, you hold it in your hand, and you flip through the pages.
And suddenly that circle isn't a circle anymore.
No. It's a character. It's moving. It has weight. It seems to make decisions. It speeds up. It slows down. It looks alive.
It's the fundamental question of the medium, really.
And the question that has been bugging me all week, the question we are trying to answer today in this deep dive is why?
Yeah.
Why does the human brain, which is supposedly this sophisticated biological machine, look at a series of dead, static images and decide, oh, that is a living thing?
It's a glitch in our perception.
It is. And more importantly, how do you control that illusion? Because as we found out in today's source material, the answer has almost nothing to do with how well you can draw that circle.
That is the part that really trips people up, I think. We assume animation is about illustration.
Right.
We think, oh, Disney animators are just the best draftsmen in the world. And they are.
They absolutely are.
But our source today argues that you can be the greatest artist in human history. You can be Michelangelo. But if you fail at two invisible concepts, your work is dead on arrival.
So we are looking at a text that is often called the Bible of the industry. We are pulling from the Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams.
A legendary book.
Truly. And we aren't just skimming the whole book today. We are doing a very focused forensic analysis of Chapter 4.
Chapter 4 is the heavy hitter.
The title of the chapter basically gives away the entire secret. It's called It's All in the Timing and the Spacing.
It sounds so simple when you say it like that, timing and spacing. It sounds like instructions for planting a garden or something.
Right, space the seeds out.
Exactly. But when you actually unpack this chapter, you realize Williams isn't just teaching you how to make cartoons, he is teaching you how to perceive reality.
That is what I loved about this read. We aren't just learning how to make a coyote fall off a cliff. We are learning to decode the DNA of movement itself.
The physics of the real world.
Yeah. We are learning how we perceive time, how we judge weight just by looking at something, and how we instinctively understand the rhythm of the physical world.
It changes your vision. Once you understand these two concepts, you start seeing them everywhere.
Everywhere.
You see them in the way a barista pours coffee. You see them in the way a car brakes at a red light. It is universal physics decoded.
So our mission today is to decode that DNA. And I promise you, listener, even if you have never drawn a stick figure in your life, and even if you have no interest in ever animating a single frame, this is going to fundamentally change how you look at the world.
It is about understanding the gap between the moments.
So let's unpack this. And to do that properly, we can't start with the textbook definitions. We have to start with a story.
A great story.
We need to travel back in time to a basement in Hollywood to meet a man named Grim Natwick.
Now there is a name. Grim Natwick. It sounds like a character from a Gothic novel or a wizard in a fantasy series.
It really does. But this guy was the real deal. In the text, Richard Williams describes going on this sort of pilgrimage to meet Grim. And the setting is really important. Williams describes it as this golden twilight in a Hollywood basement.
Which is such a specific mood. You have the dust motes floating in the air, the smell of old paper and graphite.
Yes.
And you have Richard Williams, who is already a professional animator at this point, sitting at the feet of the master.
And Grim wasn't just an old-timer. He was ancient in terms of the industry history. Williams points out something that completely blew my mind. Grim Natwick was already in his 40s when he was working on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Which really puts things in perspective. For most of us, Snow White is the beginning of time.
Right, it's 1937. It feels prehistoric.
We usually imagine the Disney studio back then filled with these 20-something prodigies inventing the art form, and mostly it was. But Grim had already lived a full artistic life before he ever drew a single dwarf.
He animated 83 scenes in Snow White. That is a massive amount of work for one person. But his legacy goes back even further than Disney. He is the guy who designed Betty Boop for Max Fleischer.
The icon! Betty Boop is probably one of the most recognizable graphic designs of the 20th century. You see her on T-shirts, mugs, mud flaps, everywhere.
And this is where the story gets a little bitter, which I think is important for the context of this meeting in the basement. Williams mentions that Grimm designed this massive global phenomenon, and he received absolutely nothing for it.
Zero, no royalties, no ownership stakes, nothing.
Williams notes that Grimm was furious about it until the day he died, and listener Grimm Natwick lived to be 100 years old.
That is 60 years of holding a grudge.
That takes energy.
It is a very specific high-octane fuel keeping you going, but I think that bitterness, that hardened exterior, adds so much weight to the advice he gives Williams.
So.
Well, you have this man who has seen it all. He has seen the industry rise. He has seen the characters become merchandise. He has been cheated. He has been celebrated. He is the oracle.
So picture this scene. You have the Golden Twilight. You have Grimm Natwick, this big Norwegian American, sitting there. And Williams focuses on a specific physical detail that I loved. He describes Grimm's hands.
Long arms and spatula hands.
Spatula hands.
It is such a great description. It strips away the romance of the delicate artist. These aren't the hands of a pianist.
No.
These are the hands of a worker. These are hands that have flipped millions of pages of paper. There are tools, broad, flat, capable spatula hands.
So Williams is sitting there waiting for the secret. He basically asks Grimm, what is it? What makes animation work? How do you create life?
Yeah.
And this 100-year-old master leans forward with those spatula hands, and he delivers the line that anchors this entire deep dive.
The delivery is crucial here. In the book, Williams actually writes it out phonetically to capture the way Grimm spoke. It wasn't a quick sentence. It was a pronouncement.
Right.
He says, animation. It is all in the timing and in the spacing. And silence. The text says there was a long pause.
He lets it hang there in the dust motes.
He does. He wants those two words to sink in. Timing and spacing. And then he leans in and whispers the coda to that commandment. He says, strange Americans were the ones to work this out.
Strange Americans. I love that phrasing so much.
It is fantastic.
It implies that this wasn't high art. It wasn't like the Renaissance masters in Italy figuring out perspective. It was a mechanical discovery.
Exactly.
It implies that it took a specific group of weird, obsessive, strange Americans to sit in a room and figure out the actual mechanics of how to fool the human eye.
It really was an engineering feat as much as an artistic one. They were reverse engineering reality. And Grimm Natwick, after a century on this planet, distilled all of that complexity down to just those two words.
Okay, so the oracle has spoken. It is timing and spacing. But here is where I have to play the skeptic, or at least the confused student. Because when I first read that, I thought, isn't that redundant?
How so?
Well, if I time something, if I say this action takes 3 seconds, aren't I automatically defining the spacing?
I see what you mean.
If I have a start point and an end point and a time limit, isn't the spacing just the math that gets me there? Why does he treat them as two separate gods?
That is the single most common point of confusion. And honestly, it is why so many people struggle with animation. They think timing is spacing, but they are completely different, distinct forces.
So how do we break them apart?
Williams uses the classic example, the cliché to end all clichés, the bouncing ball.
The old bouncing ball. If you have ever watched a making of documentary, you have seen the bouncing ball test.
You have. But Williams breaks it down in a way that is really specific to this distinction. He says the bouncing ball contains almost every important principle of animation in one single loop. So I want you to visualize a ball bouncing across your screen, left to right.
Okay, up, down, bounce, up, down, bounce.
Let's look at the timing first. In the text, Williams uses a great sound effect for the ball hitting the ground. He calls them the boinks.
The boinks.
Yes, imagine the sound. Boink, boink, boink. Those impacts, those specific moments in time where the ball touches the floor, that is the timing.
So timing is the rhythm.
Exactly. Timing is the when. If you're looking at a piece of sheet music, timing is the time signature. It is the metronome. It tells you that the ball hits the floor at second 1.0 and then again at second 2.0.
Okay, so timing provides the structure. It tells us how long the action takes.
Correct. But here is the catch. Timing tells us absolutely nothing about what happens between the boinks.
It just tells us the destination points.
Right. It says start here and end here. It doesn't tell us how the ball travels through the air. That is where spacing comes in.
The how.
The visual how. Williams defines spacing as how the drawings are arranged between the hits. He talks about clusters.
Clusters.
Think about the physics for a second. When you throw a ball straight up in the air, what happens to it?
Well, gravity is pulling it down. So it starts fast, coming out of my hand, but then it slows down as it goes up.
Right. It fights gravity, it decelerates, and when it reaches the very, very peak of that arc...
It stops, just for a microsecond, the hang time.
Exactly. And then gravity wins, and it starts to fall. Slowly at first, and then faster and faster until it hits the ground.
Okay, basic physics.
Now, apply that to a stack of paper. If we are drawing this action, and we are drawing one frame for every fraction of a second, what do the drawings look like at the top of the arc, where the ball is moving slowly?
If balls was moving slow, the drawings would be right next to each other.
Exactly. They cluster. They might even overlap. You might have 5 drawings of the ball all sitting practically on top of each other at the peak of the bounce.
Because it is not covering any distance.
Right. But as it falls, as it speeds up...
the drawings would get further apart.
Yes. The gap between drawing A and drawing B gets wider. That is spacing. Spacing is literally the distance between the drawings on the paper.
So close spacing equals slow movement. Y spacing equals fast movement.
You got it. And this is why they're different from timing. You could have the exact same timing, start at second 1, end at second 2, but you could space it completely differently.
Oh, I see.
You could have the ball move at a constant robot speed. Or you could have it zip and stop. Or you could have it ease in and out. The time is the same. The spacing creates the texture.
That distinction really helps. So timing says the ball hits the ground now. Spacing says here is the drama of how it hangs in the air and rushes to the floor.
Precisely. And Williams makes a verdict here that I found really interesting. He says timing is actually the easy part.
Right.
He says anyone can feel a beat. You can tap out a rhythm on a table. Timing is just math and music.
Yeah.
But spacing, he calls spacing the tricky part. He says good spacing is a rare commodity.
Why is it so rare? Is it just because drawing is hard?
I don't think it is about the drawing. I think it is because spacing is where the illusion of weight lives. If your spacing is off by just a millimeter, if you put those drawings just a tiny bit too far apart at the top of the arc, the ball doesn't look like it weighs 5 ounces.
It looks light.
It looks like it weighs nothing. It looks like a balloon or a ghost.
It breaks the spell.
It breaks the physics. Your brain knows how gravity works. It knows things need to accelerate. If the spacing doesn't reflect that acceleration, your brain rejects it. It says, that is not real.
So spacing is the thing that convinces your subconscious that this ink on paper has mass.
It is the texture of reality.
To prove this, and to prove that it has nothing to do with drawing skills, Williams suggests an experiment in the book that I absolutely love. He calls it the coin experiment.
This is a brilliant pedagogical tool. He basically strips away the art. He tells the reader, put down your pencil. You don't need it.
I want to walk the listener through this because you can do this mentally right now. He says, take a coin, any coin, a quarter, and put it on a table under a camera.
And if you want to replicate this today, just grab your phone.
Yeah.
There are a dozen stop-motion apps you can download for free.
So you have a coin, a static metal object.
Yeah.
And you're going to animate it bouncing.
But before you touch the coin, you have to be the director. You have to decide the timing. Williams gives us a very specific chart in the text. He says, let's make the coin bounce 4 times.
Okay, 4 bounces.
And he assigns a specific duration to each arc. He says the first big launch takes 20 frames, the second arc takes 10 frames, the third arc takes 13 frames, and the fourth arc takes 10 frames.
Wait, pause there. 20, then 10, then 13, then 10. That is weird. Physics usually works in a decay, right?
Normally, yeah.
The ball loses energy. It should go 20, 15, 10, 5. Why does it jump back up to 13 on the third bounce?
That is such a sharp observation, and it gets to the heart of the difference between a physics simulation and animation. If this were a computer simulation, yes, it would decay perfectly. But this is animation. Maybe the surface was uneven, maybe the coin hit a weird edge, or maybe, and this is where we start getting into the magic, maybe the coin has a personality that wanted to stay in the air a little longer on that third bounce.
So the imperfection creates the character.
Exactly. So you have your chart. Now, you have to execute the spacing. You have to physically push that coin with your finger.
So for that first arc, the 20-frame arc, that is almost a full second of film. That is a long time for a bounce.
It is. So to feel 20 frames, you have to move the coin very slowly at the start, tiny nudges. Then bigger pushes as it rises. Then at the top, you have to barely touch it. You have to make it overlap itself to create that hang time. And then big pushes as it falls.
You are physically enacting gravity with your finger.
You are. And when you play that back, when you watch the video,
You see a bouncing coin.
but you see more than that. This is the aha moment Williams wants us to have. You realize that you didn't draw anything. The coin never changed shape. It is a hard piece of metal. But by manipulating the spacing, you made it look flexible. You gave it weight.
It isolates the variable completely. If the movement looks wrong, you cannot blame your bad drawing skills. You cannot say, oh, I messed up the perspective. No, it is a real coin. If it looks wrong, it is 100% because your spacing is off.
It forces you to confront the movement itself. And Williams points out that this simple test reveals hidden variables that you might not even be thinking about.
Like what?
Like weight. When you watch that playback, ask yourself, does the coin feel heavy like a lead weight? Or does it feel light, like a plastic poker chip?
And that feeling comes entirely from how fast it drops.
Which is your spacing. If you space the drop widely, if it falls in 2 frames, it looks heavy. It plummets. If you space it tightly, if it floats down in 10 frames, it looks like a feather. You are defining the material of the object just by where you place it.
He also talks about personality creeping in here. And this is where I think the book gets really philosophical.
Yes.
He says that even with a simple coin, the action can look deliberate. It can look jaunty. It can look erratic, cautious, optimistic, or pessimistic.
It is wild to think about.
How on earth can a coin be pessimistic?
It sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
You think about body language. What does a pessimistic person look like? Shoulders slumped, heavy steps, low energy.
Dragging their feet.
Right. So a pessimistic bounce might be one that hits the ground hard and barely has the energy to rise. The spacing on the rise is heavy. It struggles against gravity. It gives up early.
Versus an optimistic coin.
An optimistic coin has energy. It launches fast. And maybe, at the top of the arc, it hangs there just 1 frame longer than physics says it should. It defies gravity because it is happy to be up there. It is jaunty.
So personality in animation is really just a deviation from the expected physics.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Personality is how you manipulate the spacing to show intent. And this leads us directly to what I call the Michelangelo theory of the chapter. It is one of the most provocative claims Williams makes.
Lay it on us.
He says, imagine you could go back in time and kidnap Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci. You bring them to your studio. You say, Leo, I want you to draw these frames for me.
Okay, so we have the most beautiful, anatomically perfect drawings in human history. The shading is perfect. The muscles are perfect.
Masterpieces.
Yeah.
But Williams argues, if you take those Michelangelo drawings and you apply bad timing and bad spacing,
The animation fails.
it fails completely. The drawings will look weird. They will jitter. They won't have weight. In fact, Williams suggests it might even look worse than bad art because the realism of the drawing clashes with the unreality of the movement. It creates a zombie effect.
The uncanny valley.
Exactly. But flip the script. Take a stick figure or take our coin, a featureless circle. If you apply perfect timing and perfect spacing to that simple object,
It lives. It has a soul.
it creates an emotional connection. And that establishes the hierarchy that Williams is trying to pound into our heads. Motion dominates drawing. The when, the timing, and the how, the spacing, are infinitely more important than the what, the drawing.
That is such a huge concept. It feels like it applies to so many things beyond animation.
Yeah.
You can have the best raw materials, the best script, the best ingredients, but if the execution, the rhythm is off, the whole thing falls apart.
It is true in music. It is true in comedy. You can tell the best joke in the world, but if your timing is off, silence.
Speaking of timing and spacing working together, there was one more experiment in the text that I found really helpful for visualizing this. He calls it the linear test.
Yes. This is where he strips away the bouncing arc entirely. No gravity, just a horizontal movement.
So the setup is you move a coin across a page from point A to point B, and you decide it is going to take exactly 1 second.
Which in standard film is 24 frames. So we have a fixed container. Start at frame 1 and at frame 24. That is our timing. It is non-negotiable.
Then he runs 2 scenarios. Scenario A, we space the coin out evenly. Every frame, the coin moves the exact same distance. Let's say 1 centimeter per frame, tick, 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 tick.
Right. Mechanical, linear.
Scenario B, we keep the timing the same. It still starts at frame 1 and ends at frame 24. But we change the spacing. We use what animators call easing.
We should probably define ease for the listener because you hear that term in video editing now too.
Yeah, what is an ease?
Ease just means gradual acceleration or deceleration. Ease out means you ease out of a stop. You start slow, like a car pushing off from a green light. Ease in means you ease into a stop. You brake gradually.
So in scenario B, the coin eases out of the start, moves very fast across the middle, and then eases into the stop.
Right, because if you spend more frames at the beginning and end going slow, you have to go much faster in the middle to make up the time and hit that 1 second mark.
So we run these two tests side by side. They both take 1 second. They will start and stop at the exact same moment, but they look completely different.
Completely. Scenario A, the even spacing, looks like a conveyor belt. It looks robotic. It has no consciousness. It is just translating.
And scenario B.
Scenario B looks like a deliberate action. It looks like a hand reaching for a glass of water. It looks like a car parking. It feels organic because organic things have mass. And thanks to Newton, we know that mass takes energy to move. You cannot go from 0 to 60 instantly. You have to accelerate. That ease out is the visual representation of force being applied to mass.
And the only difference was the spacing.
The timing provided the structure, the 1 second boundary, but the spacing provided the feel. It provided the sensation of biology and physics.
This brings up a fascinating dynamic that Williams mentions about the hierarchy in the studio. I never really thought about how directors and animators split these responsibilities. I just assumed everyone did everything.
It is a very strict division of labor in the classic studio system. Williams writes the director is usually the one responsible for the timing.
So the director's the one holding the stopwatch.
Yes. The director says the coyote falls off the cliff at frame 10 and he hits the ground at frame 30. The director dictates the rhythm of the film. He is the conductor of the orchestra.
He sets the tempo.
Williams says timing is half the battle. If the director gets the timing wrong, the joke won't land. But then the animator takes that chart.
And the animator's responsible for the spacing.
Exactly. The director says, get from A to B in 20 frames. The animator has to figure out how that happens. Do we ease in? Do we overshoot? Do we drag? Do we flutter? That is the performance.
So the director writes the sheet music, and the animator plays the instrument.
That is the perfect analogy. And this is why Williams points out that the greatest masters of this concept weren't actually cartoonists. He points to the silent film stars.
Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy.
And specifically, Buster Keaton.
He calls them the most brilliant masters of timing in motion picture history.
And it makes sense when you think about it. They didn't have dialogue. They couldn't rely on a witty line to sell a joke. Everything was movement. A stumble, a double take, a fall. It was all timing and spacing.
If you watch Buster Keaton, his spacing is incredible. The way he accelerates into a fall or the way he stands perfectly still, zero spacing, while a house falls around him. That is an intuitive understanding of these principles.
They were living animators. They understood the gap between the movements was where the comedy lived.
Now, we cannot talk about animation physics without addressing the elephant in the room, or maybe the rubber ball in the room. We have to talk about squash and stretch.
The classic.
But Williams has a bit of a warning about this, doesn't he? He introduces a term that I think is my new favorite word in the English language.
I know exactly what word you were talking about.
Sploopy.
Sploopy. It is such a great, gross word.
It sounds exactly like what it is. But let's back up. What is squash and stretch, and why does he warn against it?
So squash and stretch is the idea that living things and flexible objects change shape when they move. When a ball hits the ground, it flattens out to absorb the impact. When it flies through the air, it elongates to show speed.
Like a rubber ball. They make things look dynamic.
Right. It is the hallmark of the Disney style. But Williams warns against the rubber trap. He says that rookie animators learn this trick and then they overdo it. They squash everything. They stretch everything.
And the result is sploopy.
The result is that the character looks like it is made of wet dough. It looks like it has no bones. It loses its structural integrity.
Why is that a problem?
Because of the conservation of volume. In real life, even if you squash a water balloon, the volume of the water stays the same. If you just squash a drawing without preserving its volume, your brain stops perceiving it as a solid object. It starts seeing it as a liquid. It looks sploopy.
And he brings in evidence to prove you don't need this, right? He uses a photo from 1951.
The Harold Edgerton photo. This is a famous strobe photograph of a golf ball bouncing on concrete.
Now, a golf ball is hard. It is rigid.
Very hard. And in the photo, you can see the moment of impact. Does the golf ball squash?
Barely. I mean, maybe a tiny bit, but to the naked eye, it stays round.
Exactly. And yet, when you see a golf ball bounce in real life, does it look dead?
No, it looks incredibly lively. It pings off the ground.
Williams's point is that a rigid object, like a coin or a golf ball, can give a good enough effect if the spacing is right. You don't need to distort the drawing to sell the bounce. If you get the acceleration out of the bounce correct, if the spacing is wide enough immediately after the hit, the eye believes the force.
So sploopy is basically a crutch. It is overacting.
Precisely. It is trying to shout when you should be whispering. Don't rely on cheap tricks like squashing the drawing if you haven't mastered the fundamental spacing.
I want to pivot to the last section of our source material, which is kind of the proof in the pudding. We have all this theory, Grim Natwick's basement wisdom, the bouncing ball, the coin test, the fear of sploopiness, but does it work? And Williams shows us stills from his film, A Christmas Carol.
This is a 1972 animated film. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It is stunning. It doesn't look like a cartoon. It looks like Victorian engravings that have somehow come to life. The cross hatching is incredibly detailed.
And this is a big moment for Williams.
Huge. He won his first Oscar for this film. It proved that he wasn't just a theorist, he was a master.
But what I love about this section is his humility. He just won an Academy Award. He is at the top of the game. And what does he write about the work in this chapter?
He says, we're starting to get better.
Starting to get better.
Talk about an understatement. But he also admits he had help. He didn't do it alone. He lists the crew for that film, and it is a murderer's row of talent.
Who does he mention?
He mentions Bugs Bunny animators, specifically Ken Harris and Chuck Jones, the guys who basically invented the vocabulary of funny cartoons. And he mentions Disney alumni like Abe Lovetto, George Nicholas, Hal Ambro.
So he surrounded himself with the people who understood timing and spacing better than anyone else on Earth.
He did. He basically hired his professors. And that is the lesson. Even Richard Williams, the guy writing the survival kit, the guy with the Oscar, saw himself as a student. He realized that mastering the gap between the frames, the spacing, is a lifelong journey. You never fully solve it. You just get better at seeing it.
It really circles back to what Grim Natwick said in that basement. It is all in the timing and the spacing. It sounds so simple, almost dismissive, but you can spend 100 years exploring the nuance of those two words.
And Grim did. He lived to 100, still thinking about frames and timing, still angry about Betty Boop, but still thinking about the art.
So let's bring this home for the listener. We've talked about boinks, clusters, optimistic coins, and sploopy golf balls. What is the big takeaway here? How should this change how we walk out the door today?
For me, the big takeaway is that movement is a language. And like any language, it has grammar and vocabulary. Timing is the grammar. It is the structure, the rules, the beat. Spacing is the vocabulary. It is the expression, the flair, the accent.
And you don't need to be a draftsman to speak that language.
No, we all speak it. You speak it when you drive. You speak it when you gesture with your hands. You speak it when you hesitate before answering a question. You are constantly manipulating timing and spacing to communicate meaning to the people around you.
It is empowering, in a way. It democratizes the art form. You don't need to be Michelangelo. You just need to know how to move the coin.
Exactly.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over as you go about your day. We talk about how the personality of the coin, whether it is jaunty or pessimistic, was just a result of its timing and spacing.
Right.
So think about the people you know. Think about yourself. Think about what we call charisma or awkwardness or attitude. How much of that is just the rhythm at which we move and react?
That is a deep question.
When you watch a friend walk across the room or you see an actor on screen, ask yourself, what is their spacing telling you? Are they easing in? Are they overlapping? Or are they just sploopy?